Transition Tuesdays with Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center. My name is Laura Knapp. I'm one of the parent consultants and the transition coordinator. And with me tonight is Renee Topper. You want to wave, Renee? And we will be presenting this to you. So at any time that you have questions, feel free to put in the chat and I'll try to answer your questions as we go along. I want this to be interactive and meaningful. Okay. So welcome to Transition 101. Okay, next slide. Hold on, I just got to pop up on my computer. So, all right, thank you. So who is Connecticut Parent Advocacy? Really quickly, we are the Connecticut Parent and Training Information Center under IDEA, which is a special education law. Every state is required to have at least one Parent and Training Information Center. So that is us, and we have been proud to hold this title for the past 30 years. Next, thank you. So we do receive funding from several sources. So we receive funding from the Federal Department of Education, the State Department of Education, Early Childhood, Down Syndrome Act, and thank you. Okay, next slide. So I just want to say really quickly, my internet is unstable and just glitched a little bit. So if for any reason we do lose power and we're not able to get back on, we will reschedule. So it's often misunderstood that we are advocates. We are not. We teach families how to effectively advocate for their students, for their children, and to partner. And we believe that, parents know their child's history, and sharing their story in an effective collaborative manner is in their best interest, and we show them how to do that. And you can read our mission statement. I don't want to read it verbatim for you. So today we're going to learn about transition to adulthood, and we want to increase your understanding of the transition planning process and what the federal law states. And also the IEP, the Individualized Educational Program. So there's a lot to cover, and it's a little bit overwhelming, and it's a little bit technical. So this is one of our not so interactive or friendly PowerPoints and trainings, but it is a lot of information that you do need to know. So again, at any time during this presentation, please feel free to ask questions. Okay. So what is transition? What does the law say? The individuals, no, you are on the right slide. Go back one. Thank you. Thank you. So in the Individuals with Disability Act, the key part of the legislation is to meet their unique needs and prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living, and that is bolded there. And that is the key part for transition services, is to prepare them for further education and independent living and employment, so life after high school. Okay, next slide. So the IEP, our Connecticut does have a new system for the IEP. It's a little bit different, and there are a few changes with the format in the transition section. You'll find that many of the items that were on page 6 of the old IEP are now all in one section. And they're basically reorganized so that it flows together. So you still have transition goals function the same as the other goals. And there's a list of previous transition assessments that will be included, and also the transfer rights is in a different section. And transition services, that section will only be generated for those students who are in transition. So transition planning is done through the PPT process. So if the team is discussing transition services, it is done through a planning and placement team meeting. And it's all about the student. The student must be invited. There are measurable annual goals and objectives that are developed and which support the post-secondary goal statements, which we will get into a little bit later. And the appropriate measurable post-secondary goal statements are based upon age-appropriate transition assessments. We'll get into transition assessments a little bit later as well. Oh, wait, go back. Thank you. So again, they're going to be developing the goals and objectives in this meeting. There should be discussions. Ideally, there should be discussions ahead of time. And the students' interests must be represented. Okay, next slide. No, you were right. Thank you. So the federal it states that the age is 16, but in Connecticut, the age of transition starts at the age of 14. So when filling out the IEP in the new system, there's a question that asks, is this PPT developing secondary transition goals? So are they starting the transition process? If they check yes, then the transition section automatically generates. There is a fail-safe or a stopgap, if you will, with the system, and it's to help with compliance. So when the student is 13 years old, it asks this, and it asks, are you doing this? So transition services are developed. So when the student turns 14, they have transition goals and objectives on their IEP. So legal in Connecticut, by age 14, there has to be transition services and planning and goals and objectives when that student turns 14. So if the student, you have your annual review, and your son or daughter is 13 years old in October, but in April, they're going to be turning 14. That annual review in October, they have to start the transitioning process, because that IEP that will be in effect for that entire year when he or she turns 14. Okay. And there are hyperlinks to some the goals, to some of the laws that you can look into. Next slide. So PPT membership. I see that we do. Okay. Thought we had a question, but we do not. PPT membership. They ask, is the student in attendance, yes or no? And the summary is really important to capture the student's preferences, interests. Information is written and especially important when the student is not in attendance. So there will be a statement saying what their interests are, what their preferences are, any activities and things like that that they want to complete. And as far as other outside agencies, are they invited to the PPT meeting? It's really important to have a discussion prior to the PPT to see what other outside agencies might attend. It could be the Department of Developmental Services, it could be the Department of Social Services, BRS, Level Up, a community agency, because the school district does need parent permission to invite those agencies. And it's really important, the last one is if the agency is coming, or if the agency has agreed to provide services or pay for services, there will be description of what those services are. And it's important to think about outside agencies because they help identify the student needs and the community resources. They provide services at school, and they help prepare the student for work and what is needed in the job location, or develop advocacy skills or work skills. So those things are really important. And it also helps the student and the parents and even the school district know what is the criteria of that agency for adult services, because they may be very different than what they are for when you're in high school. Thank you, Renee. BRS is the Bureau of Rehabilitation Services. We use a lot of acronyms in our special education world. So please, if I use an acronym and someone's not sure what it is, just please ask. So again, transition is about the student, and the student must be involved. And being present and participating helps build them their self-advocacy, their independence, the knowledge of their strengths, their weaknesses. It helps with self-determination. It also helps with speaking in front of a group, which they might have to do, you know, in their future jobs, during job interviews, college. It helps them develop those skills. Even if they're there for 10 minutes, that's fine. Start small, that's what we say. And again, the students must be invited, and if not, their interests, preferences, and need to be listed. I did have one student, it was really nice to see that they actually ran their team meeting. And the students, I had help gathering all the information, created a PowerPoint, and actually ran it. It was nice to see that how they shared in their strengths, their accomplishments, and also was pretty honest about some of the things they struggled with. And at one point they said, I didn't want to do this because honestly I was lazy. I didn't want to get up at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning to go to this job. So I woke up late, and that, it was a learning curve, and it was a learning experience for the student, but it was really nice to see the growth. And they were very, very nervous at first speaking in front of everybody, but by the end of the year, they were running their own PPT meeting. It was great to see. And I just want to say, transition services doesn't have to start at age 14. It can start earlier. Talk to the school team about it, and state the reasons why you might want transitions to start earlier, and go from there. Okay, next slide. So transition services, what are they? It is a set of coordinated, transition is a coordinated set of activities, and is the process of assisting the student moving from school to life after high school. So programs and services, even starting in middle school and especially in high school, it'll assist the student and their family to create a vision for what life will look like in the future. And it really centers on you'll hear this a lot, post-secondary education, training, employment, and independent living. Okay. So it really helps facilitate that movement from school to after high school. So it could be continuing a post-secondary education, doesn't always necessarily mean college. It could be adult education. It could be a 2-year college. It could be a certificate program, some sort of training for a certain skill set, employment, adult services, independent living, and community participation. So the activities must be based on the individual student needs, taking into account the student's preferences, interests, and needed activities to build those skills. So it could be also academic study skills. It could be vocational skills, resume writing, health and safety, social skills, self-advocacy skills, independent living skills, such as time management and activities of daily living. There's a whole list. I mean, these are just some of them. So to recap, it's a result-based orientated process. So it's assisting the student moving from high school to life after high school by improving the academic and functioning achievements. It's based on assessments. Okay, so the course of study is really the activities, the courses that they're taking to achieve what they want to do after high school. It's really building those skills. So if you think of it this way, it's a results are building the skills, meaning the goals and objectives, and based on the need, and the transition assessments, and the course of study of what classes are they taking. So do we have any questions so far? Okay.
Laura, would you mind if I share something?
Please do.
When you were talking about the student, being involved in the kid, sorry, my daughter wanted to come on in. She's working on self-advocacy goals.
There you go.
Yeah, talking about being lazy and having a hard time getting up and stuff like that. I think it's important for the teams and for families to make sure that that's captured, because you could be looking at a kiddo that might want to take night classes or might want to work a second shift or something like that. So they're already, giving that information and transition plans that can be individualized for them. So there's a lot of information that that student can share.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So we always ask this of our students, of our family members, of our children. What do you want to do? I'm still figuring out what I want to do. Just kidding. I love CPAC. When transition planning, we ask that question. What do you want to do after high school? So that's why we do a transition assessments ongoingly. So transition assessment should be done every year. It can be done, you can do more than one transition assessment a year. And really getting students involved in that transition assessment in their planning. It's a really good way for that self-discovery and allowing them to express self-determination, and it allows them to understand their disability, their strengths, their weak, I don't like to call them weaknesses, but things that'll help them, the things that they need to help them. Next slide. So let's talk, I know I mentioned transition assessments, so let's talk about transition assessment. So it's the process of gathering information that'll help the student. It helps the educators, the family members make informed decisions about life during and after high school. And there's all sorts of different types of transition assessments that will address certain domains, certain areas of life. I like the ones that address all areas of life. And that's why it's good to do multiple transition assessments, because at one point you might be looking at social skills and time management or something of that nature. And another time you might really be focusing on some of those academic skills needed for even to go to college or for a certain job. And in the new IEP, well, it's not the new IEP anymore, but how it's formatted now, you'll see transition assessments, and then you'll see the transition assessment and the date. You'll have the summary. And then below that, you'll have a history of transition assessments. So if there's no assessments being done currently, you won't necessarily see any new information on there. And you need these transition assessments to really generate what transition services you're going to do. Okay. And it also helps identify what it's called the post-school outcome goal statement. Good, next slide. Thank you. So these are some samples of transition assessments, and further on in the PowerPoint, and I will put the PowerPoints in the chat again in case anybody came in after the beginning. There's a whole list of them, and there's a link to these. Next slide. So how does the whole process flow? So transition assessments are designed to determine interests and strengths that we just talked about. And they build the post-secondary outcome goal statements. And that is a mouthful. I'll wait for you. Thank you. And it's for students, it'll help them know, what do I need to do to reach my future goals? And for educators, they help the educators know and understand what that student needs. It really helps students take ownership of the whole transition process in their life. So you can do transition assessments. There's student family interviews, there's vocational evaluations, interest skills, job interviews, There's job shadows, there's situational assessments and community experiences. So there's a whole bunch of transition assessments. And they can look at independent living, community participation, communication, technology, obtaining and maintaining employment. Next slide. So you heard me say this, post-school outcome goal statement. What are they? It's a statement of what the student wants to do after high school. It is the end goal. And again, they're based on the assessments and they're still measurable and they should be written in the following manner. It should be the starter sentence, the student will, and you would enter the target skill or behavior. So the student will do something, and where and when and how. So after graduation, Johnny will attend a two-year college to obtain a degree or certificate in visual arts. So that would be an example of a post-school outcome goal statement. It's what the student will do after high school. So it's not actually the process of gaining the skill, those are the goals and objectives. So the post-school outcome goal statements, you'll see in the IEP, you will see, does the student require specially designed instruction to support independent living skills? If it is checked yes, there must be a post-school outcome goal statement for independent living, okay? There has to be a post-school outcome goal statement for employment and for further education. So there has to be an education post-school outcome goal statement, and there's one for employment, okay? And this is where we get a lot of questions because it gets a little tricky. And for each post-school second, they keep changing the names, so that's why I keep going back between post-school and post-secondary. So post-school outcome goal statements, for each one of those, there must be annual transition goals and objectives. Okay, so if you have all three of them, you will have at least 3 annual transition goals and objectives. Okay, now does that make sense? And does anybody have any questions? So we do have a question. Any suggestions of common go-to transition assessments? One of my go-to transition assessment is called the TPI. It's the Transition Planning Inventory, and it covers all domains of transition. So it covers questions about communication, education, community, social skills, and independent living skills, time management, executive functioning. It's pretty much on there. So annual transition goals, measurable annual goals and objectives support the post-secondary goal statements. They assist the student being prepared, and so they build the skills to achieve what they want to do after high school. It's important to note that other academic goals in reading and writing or math may support the post-school outcome goal statements. So you might see a combination. Okay, but what you cannot do is write a combination of an annual goal. So it can't be an annual goal of education and employment combined. They have to be separate. So one goal for the education and further training, another goal for employment, and another goal for independent living. Okay. So the goals are the what, and the objectives are really developing those skills. Next slide. Okay, so the present level of performance, so they're all in front of the goals now. And you have the parent and student input. And then you have the present levels of performance. So that's going to include classroom data, assessments, all sorts of data. And remember, this is the chance for the student to really speak up, and also the parents put their concerns in before every single goal. So it's really important. What we liked about this is that the families, they have input in every single section, before each goal. So whenever there's a concern or a need, there should be a goal developed. You know, and think about overall how are they performing in the classroom? What are the needs? Is there a goal that needs to address those concerns or needs? And the last part, it says impact of a student's disability or involvement in the regular classroom. So if anything, any other supplemental things might go down here. You know, it'll have a statement about how does that impact their performance in the general education classroom. Okay, next slide. So the annual goals, they still function the same way. And these are annual transition goals. So you'll see the area that it's addressing, whether it's education or whether it's employment or independent living. And you'll have the goal, and you'll have the objectives. So they still need to be measurable. And what will they be doing specifically in that year that the IEP is in effect? And it'll really show how the student will progress towards achieving their post-school outcome statements. It'll help in how it progresses achieving the goal and targets the development of that skill. And, you know, with the new system, all the goals are to align with the Connecticut core standards. With transition, there aren't standards per se, but you can align them with the Connecticut core transition skills. And there's also career and college readiness skills, and ONET has some employment as well. So you can align them to those. And those resources are further down in the PowerPoint, so you can access those. So the goals are have a certain format, and with CT sets, there's drop downs and there's starter sentences, and there's links to actually look at some goal samples for the districts. And again, when I know it's all a new platform, it's all a new system, so there's glitches in a learning curve. But if you are encountering any issues or concerns, talk to the team about it, and they should address it and hopefully get any glitches fixed. So the goal format should be the conditions, the material, or the setting, the student will, and something measurable or observable, so that skill or behavior. And then to what extent, how are they going to determine mastery? So the evaluation and criteria and method. So how are they evaluating the success of that goal, and how often are they reporting it? So you'll see that under progress monitoring, how often are they going to report it? It's the same as it was before. It should be at least any time when report cards are given. Okay. And you'll see any related services that are necessary down at the bottom. You can highlight it. And one thing I just want to, because we get a lot of questions about the objectives and, you know, how is that helping? So you really want to look at when the goals are out and the objectives are out, you really want to look at how is that skill being developed and what opportunities that are available to demonstrate that skill is being developed and how that's it's showing that they are progressing towards achieving what they want to do after high school. I think I might have a question. They are interpreting, so I was asked to slow down, so I'm sorry for that. Okay, so what can help? What things can help? Next slide. So one thing that can help is person-centered planning. Then there's several types of planning. There's it's information to gather and how to achieve their future goals, what a good life will look like, looking at what resources are available to help with developing and strategizing. They'll actually map out what the student or what the person wants to do, what resources are available, what is in the community, what kind of family supports are there, what they like or don't like, how they don't want to live, what kind of supports do they not want. So it's a pretty involved process. Some types of person-centered planning or student-centered planning takes more time than others. So some are more involved, but there are several types, and they must be individualized. It's not a one size fits all. It's really based on the student need and what they're considering. And there's several different links to different types of student-centered planning.
Laura, for the student-centered planning, is that something that is naturally done at the
No.
PPT, or does a family request this?
Great question. The family really needs to request it. Some schools are doing it. I know there's a lot of training right now in the state for life course, and a lot of schools are using life course. Many schools use maps, so it really depends. Some folks saying, we really need some help. Let's have a planning session. And then other times the parent or the student needs to ask for it. Another thing that helps with this whole process is called the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, WIOA. It's a federal law, and it focuses on workforce development. It is part of the Rehabilitation Act. So part goes to the Vocational Rehabilitation Agency and part goes to the Department of Labor, and that would be at the American Job Center, and the Rehabilitation Agency, or Voc Rehab, you'll hear it be called. For us, that is Level Up. And the Rehabilitation Agency, they collaborate and coordinate with the school district. And there is some new legislation regarding this. They also will be coordinating with other state agencies. So there is a link to the bill. There's a whole new bill regarding transition in the state of Connecticut. I started going through it, and then the school year helped, and it started, and then that was it. So I'm still going through it. There's a lot of information. So even though they coordinate and collaborate with the school districts, it does not reduce or limit the school district's obligation to provide transition services and employment, and helping that student in the area of employment. So they can't say, well, they're, BRS or Level Up is doing it, so we don't have to do anything. There still needs to be a partnership and an obligation for the school district to do something. Okay. So really the whole WIOA Act is really looking at increasing the opportunities to practice improved workplace skills, such as internships and work-based learning opportunities. And that's the whole point of it. And that's why they BRS partners with the school districts and with Level Up specifically. Okay, the next slide. So Level Up are pre-employment services. And it could include, and it doesn't necessarily include all of these things. And a lot also depends on funding. So it could be typically is about 2 years before they graduate. And level up is a job experience. Usually it's the entry job. It's just in the summertime that they will place a student in a job for a short period of time. That's the level up services. But it can include peer mentoring, working in a small group to learn how to identify skills and personal strengths, likes and dislikes, social skills. Could be self-advocacy and identifying the resources that can be found within the family and the community that can help them for further education and training and employment. There's work-based learning. It's minimal on-site support. It's really the introduction to work. There's workplace readiness training, or there could be, it's just increasing the knowledge of appropriate skills. There's a technology, assistive technology. Is there a need for that? What could it be? For it is individualized for each student. Next slide. So there's career and job exploration. That might be interest skills and looking at the work values through career assessment tools. It really can help identify some of those needs for the student and potential career pathways. So they might look at a career pathway and look at what are the skills needed. What does the job market look like? There's counseling for post-secondary education and training. It's really exploring college and other training that's available after high school. They might meet with professionals working in a career field to learn firsthand what it's like and what the job industry entails. So that we might be in informational interviews and some job shadowing experiences. And slide 28. So again, we mentioned the Bureau of Rehabilitation Services. So they have Level Up, and there's a link to the Level Up brochure. So we have Level Up, which is under the Bureau of Rehabilitation Services, BRS, and then that falls under the Department of Aging and Disability Services, or ADS. I remember it as DADS. It's just easier for me to remember it that way. Okay. And when you're looking at the IEP, further down into the IEP, you'll see what the course of study, and that is really what courses are they taking to help them achieve their post-secondary goal statements. It's a description of the coursework and the activities that are needed to help the student achieve that. And also, if they have completed that, that means the academic requirements. Basically, what that means is, do they have the credits, enough credits to graduate? So for students who have enough credits to graduate, but they're remaining in school, that means they're not accepting the diploma, and they're going to remain for transition services only. So they wouldn't have any description of the course of study because they have basically fulfilled all those requirements to graduate. So anticipated exit criteria. So this is when will the student actually receive their diploma. So if it is at 12th grade with every other student, it'll have that date, that year date on there. If they're remaining for transition services, it'll be a later date. So one thing for our families to really know is, once you accept the diploma, then it relieves the school district of any responsibility to provide services. Okay. So at the PPT meeting, if it's decided that the student will remain for transition services for 1 or 2 years, the date will go in there. So students can remain through the age of 22. That was changed recently. So the student before last year, if the student turned 21 or 22 rather, in the end of September, services stopped the day before the birthday. Now they can remain all the way to the end of that school year. And there's the link. You'll see it in blue, the link to the legislation. Okay, the summary of performance. Not everyone knows about this, but the summary of performance, the school district should be developing that as soon as the student starts transition. So it's really all about the student, about their performance and what services and supports and what they need. It's a breathing, living document. It's going to change, and really they want student input. So it is given in their senior year, and you'll see further on that it's given to different public agencies, colleges, or even a workplace. So it is a very important document, and the student must be involved, and they should be reviewing it at the end of the year with the student. It's in the student transition portfolio. And the summary of performance in the student's transition portfolio really helps the student understand their strengths, what supports will be needed, and being involved helps them practice self-advocacy and self-determination. And it helps them develop their voice. Next slide. So it really assists the student in transition years in high school and beyond.
Que las vayan subiendo.
And it helps establishes the student's eligibility for reasonable accommodations, whether it's in college or other places. So it'll give that agency an idea of who that student is. Okay, next slide. I think we have a question. Oh, good question. Pauline wants to know, does the school year start July 1st? No. Can you clarify that? Are you looking for as far as age 22? Is that what the question pertains to? Okay, yes. So if the student turns 21 or 22 July 1st, it's yes, they will continue with that next school year, correct? Yes, the power of attorney can apply for the transfer of rights. Perfect timing. We're going to get into that right now. So at least 1 year before high school, before age 18, the school district must inform the student and the parents of the transfer of rights. It does say guardianship and conservatorship, but the Public Act, the Transition Act that I talked about, at the first PPT meeting starting at age 14, the school districts are now required to inform the families of all types of decision making, include that that would include supportive decision making, powers of attorney. It would be guardianship, conservatorship, a whole list of them. There's all sorts of types. You can just do a simple release. There's many ways that a student can choose who they want to be involved. Okay. So for example, the student can just write a letter to the school district saying that I want my parents or whoever they want to remain involved in the planning and placement team meetings and help make decisions. And the school district needs to adhere to that. Okay. And the next slide. So on the IEP, there's actually a checkbox, and they might be changing this with the new legislation. I'm not sure. Will the student be 17 within 1 year? If so, then they have to make sure that the families know about the transfer of rights. And if they have any documentation saying that the parent will remain involved, they will write down, they'll put in the date, the supporting documentation. So the system is supposed to be, you're able to upload the documents right into the system. So at 18, the school districts will notify the age of majority, they'll notify the parents, they'll talk to the parents, they'll talk to the student. By age 18, then those rights transfer. If there's something in writing, they'll upload that, and then it's updated every year after. And that is an example of a letter the student can write to the district. Next slide. So next on on the IEP, you'll see a list of resources, and these are just some of the resources that the district may share with you. And there's links to those in the bottom of at the end of the PowerPoint. Okay. And the next. So what will happen after high school is the students will receive a survey, and it's really asking them how the transition services went. And they actually listen to that, and they do read that. So just want to give you notice that that will happen. You'll see something coming from the State Department of Education. Okay, and they use all sorts of varieties. They might send something in the mail. They might send it. If there's a phone number, they might send a text. Next slide. Okay, high school versus college. So with high school, it is an entitlement. It is a law. With college, it's eligibility under the ADA. It's only accommodations. It is not direct instruction. The students are responsible for seeking help. And this was a hard one for me when my daughter went to college. She was always asking for help, but I couldn't necessarily call the college and say, hey, can you get this professor to do X, Y, and Z? Where I couldn't even ask any financial information questions. I'm like, I'm the one paying the bill. It was really like, nope, unless you have a release, we can talk to you. And even when you do have that release, it can be difficult because it's not everybody always sees it, and it can be a challenge. So it's really based on accommodations. That for college, it might be extra time on an exam. It could be a different location. It really depends. So the college, when the student or the family, they go to visit the college, they should look at the disability center and give them the assessments, the summary of performance, and the IEP, and they'll look at all that information and look and say, these are the accommodations that the student can have in college. Next slide. Okay. So again, adult services, having a disability does not guarantee that they will meet the criteria. There's long wait lists. There's specific eligibility criteria for the Department of Developmental Services. It is the IQ is 69 or below, and that's a hard cutoff. And again, in the educational system, it's specifically designed instruction. It's an entitlement. There's laws. There's protections. Okay, it's a listing of the adult service agencies. So we do have the Department of Aging and Disability Services. We have Department of Developmental Services, Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. Okay, and those are all hyperlinked. Okay, next. Okay, I'm going to pause right here. We have a couple of questions. Oh, do transition services have to be at the high school if a student stays on until the age of 22? Wonderful question. It's recommended that they're not at the high school because the student isn't in high school taking the high school classes anymore. They're doing transition services only. So typically it's in the community or in a separate place, but sometimes they do have them at the high school in some, back corner or something. And so sometimes if the district does not have a transition program, they might partner with other districts and do like a regional transition program. And just because the transition program, it's not the student fits the program. If the program isn't a fit for the student and it's not appropriate, there should be a discussion of what would be appropriate. What services do they need? Can the school district partner with a community agency to fulfill that? If not, are there other transition programs that would be appropriate? Yeah, can you be eligible for level up even if the student will be under DDS for the future? Yes. Any student with an IEP or 504 can do level up. Okay. So if you want to just scroll through tools and resources, Renee. So these are the Transition Bill of Rights in English and Spanish. Those are the Connecticut core transition skills. They are being updated, so hopefully an update will come soon. And there is Building a Bridge, okay, which is is for students and families to help them prepare for life after high school. So there's checklists, skills, personal strengths lists, likes and dislikes. There's also some little assessments. They're mostly in the form of the checklist. There's sample goals and objectives. And stepping forward, there is an update coming soon in the Spanish version. Yay. And it's broken into sections. So it's a guide, but it's broken into 4 sections and resources. There's an interactive version and it has information about rights and responsibilities, PPT meetings, and planning for the future. Okay, next slide. Okay, and these are the transition assessments. So you'll see the transition assessment resource guide. It is an older version. They are coming up with a new one, but it has a lot of great tools in there, and it gives a description and examples of the assessment itself and what areas it covers. And that is the 2008, the one I was just talking about. And here's another transition guide from the U.S. Department of Education. So a lot of the transition are based on the youth guideposts, and those are there's a link to the guide. So it's career-based preparation, youth development, connecting activities, family involvement, school-based preparatory experiences. And next. So this is the secondary transition page for the State Department of Education. And you can look at all the sorts of different types of transition programs on Ed's site. It's the last, I don't know if Renee, if you can kind of circle around there for me. It's yep. And there's the directions, and that has a lot of public, which would be the school district transition program, and also like community programs. So things other than the school district. And some of them link with and have partnerships with colleges. Okay, next slide. And there's just a whole bunch of different resources. And so there's money resources, career resources, and go to the next slide. Yep. There's a link to our different pages. So I'm going to actually launch a quick poll. And if you can, while I am answering questions, if we could just So let's see. If a guardian does not agree with the transition program chosen by the school, what right does the guardian have? Good question. I would gather why you do not agree with the transition program. Look at what your young adults' needs are, what skills do they need to build, and talk to the school district. Say this program is not meeting the needs. This is what my son or daughter, what they need, and we need to come up with a plan and see. Like I said, they can partner with different community agencies to help it fill those gaps. And if not, then you can discuss other transition programs that would be appropriate.
Laura, who's responsible for transportation during transition?
School district.